Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Professor Micah. I will be talking to you all about the full moon in Sagittarius that we have coming up on June 11th, 2025. We're doing this video a little bit differently today. My house is a mess because I'm in the midst of organizing it, and it looks like a tornado just kind of blew up in my house, and I have papers everywhere. So to save me the embarrassment of that, you're just hearing my voice today. And we are going to be doing, this video in a little bit of a different format, but it'll still get you the cosmic knowledge that you need for this full moon that's coming up. So, when we have a full moon in Sagittarius, we see a couple different themes. We do see travel, we see themes of freedom and expansion. We can also see like beliefs and teaching, knowledge, all those kinds of themes coming up as well. And because this full moon is making a trine to both Saturn and Neptune in Aries, there's some sort of cutting off of old beliefs that are no longer serving us. Whenever Saturn and Neptune are together, they're definitely dissolving something. And when it's talking about Sagittarius at a Scorpio degree, no less, because 20 is going to be a Scorpio degree, we are looking at some sort of tearing down of things that just our belief systems that just do not match anymore. So it's a lot of disillusionment, especially with Sagittarius. Sagittarius being ruled by Jupiter can be very optimistic. By the way, the ruler of this moon is going to be Jupiter in Cancer. Jupiter in Cancer is Jupiter's exaltation. And so there's a lot of optimism here, especially like emotional optimism. Like I'm talking really feeling into the positivity and being very almost like very sure and getting very excited over something. But here's the thing, we have Jupiter and Mercury conjunct in Cancer, where we're getting all this emotional excitement and maybe even speaking up and like through your emotions or having like emotional conversations. But that's all going to be squaring Neptune and Saturn in Aries, and so it's almost like don't speak too quickly, um, because there is still a lot of room for change to happen. Another way that I could look at this square is that it's essentially Saturn is saying, okay, you're excited about these, dreams coming true, or, like trying to find somewhere where you feel emotionally secure, because that's definitely going to be Cancer. But have you actually put the work in? If not, then things are going to fall apart really quickly and it's going to get ugly. Something else I could see with that square to Mercury and Jupiter is we could see some emotional burnout, or like even like decision paralysis. Um, I could see like some people feeling like, you almost like care too much, um, but you can't figure out like how to express that to certain people, or can't figure out how to deal with those emotions yourself. And sitting in possible disappointment can get really heavy anytime the moon is making any sort of aspect to Saturn. Things do get a bit heavy. And that's interesting when we're talking about such an optimistic sign such as Sagittarius, because Sagittarius is definitely like vibes. It likes to be loud, it likes to be blunt, it likes to be honest. And so it's kind of like somebody, excuse my language, but shitting on your cupcake when you are trying to get some stuff done. Saturn, that's trine from Saturn to the moon, is essentially saying, yes, you're talking about all this stuff. You're excited and all of that, but it's almost like it brings in somebody, possibly a Sagittarius, and asking you, but have you actually done the work? Do you actually have structure? Do you actually have a plan? Have you thought about everything? That is definitely something that I could see happening during this full moon. We can see, like I said, foggy communication, some mixed messages, even some ghosting is something I could see with that square to Neptune and Saturn from Mercury. I could definitely see pregnancy, um, some pregnancy announcements with Jupiter conjunct Mercury in Cancer. But I'm wondering if we some people will have those conversations with either their partners, and not everybody is knows how to handle that information, and so like some ghosting happens. Fingers crossed that's not how that shows up for anybody watching this video. But there can be a lot of like emotional overwhelm that I think comes with this, because everything is so big when we're talking about emotions with a full moon in Sagittarius. um, we can see also maybe a bit of cognitive dissonance, between what your gut is saying and what reality is just kind of throwing at you, and you're having to shift plans. If it has to do with maybe moving, Cancer can be real estate, um, or just having to clear out certain emotional baggage that has to do with the past that maybe you didn't even realize was affecting you. And so this full moon can be very healing, but you have to be willing to face the music, so to speak, to get the most out of it. Um, let's see. I just want to make sure that I'm not missing anything else. Yeah, I think actually that is about it. Yeah, this is a very optimistic moon, but I do think, as long as you are prepared for some reality checks and some things to be let go of, whatever is going to, kind of crumble, um, I beg you to go ahead and just let it go. That square, like the Neptune Saturn conjunction squaring off with the ruler of Jupiter in Cancer, is clearing out stuff that is karmically not meant for you. And so, while it might be in a very emotional time where people are, just giving it to you straight, and it's kind of like a truth hurts thing, and maybe even people are being very loud and obnoxious during this time, because I could definitely see that as well. Um, let the things that are trying to be dissolve, because I think you'll come out of the other end much better for it. Other than that, if you are watching this on divination, head over to my YouTube channel, Eden Eye Tarot. On June 11th, the horoscopes will be out with this video. This is the just kind of like the breakdown of the full moon in Sagittarius, but the actual horoscopes with this video will be out on my YouTube channel. That'll post in Discord on June 11th at the latest. And if you are watching this on my YouTube, stay tuned, and we will get into the horoscopes for this full moon. Hello, Aries. Welcome to your horoscope for the full moon in Sagittarius. This is going to be a full moon that's happening in your ninth house, where we find your beliefs, higher education, as well as travel. So it's definitely going to be a very eventful full moon for you. I have my notes here. So get your planners, wine, popcorn, anything you need for taking notes and just kind of really getting filled in on all that this full moon has for you. So, with the ninth house being involved with this full moon, the first thing that comes to mind is graduations in particular, especially since it's full moon and we see things coming to their culmination and endings when we see full moons happening. Something else that I could see is obviously travel, learning something new, whether it's like learning a new language or just kind of trying on different hats when it comes to learning about different cultures. That is something else I could see as well, or like trying out new styles that are coming from different cultures or new foods and things like that. But mostly I see it as more like learning and belief systems, getting a bit more meditative and spiritual when we're talking about the ninth house, or especially a ninth house full moon. It can definitely bring up some very expansive emotions for sure. Um, you can really see like some shift in beliefs when we're talking about a full moon in the ninth house, especially with Sagittarius being involved. You or someone that's close to you might be celebrating a major milestone. It doesn't have to be a graduation in particular. It could just be like an engagement. It can be a pregnancy. It could be, someone saying that they're moving. I could see any one of those. Just kind of like as a disclaimer, with Jupiter entering into Cancer, I think we'll be seeing like a lot of like some sort of like pregnancy, or like at least a lot of like just very fertile creative energy coming in for all of the horoscopes. So that's my little disclaimer here. Maybe I'll name this video something to do with like pregnancy. um, and we could even see, like, you possibly trying to make decisions about moving abroad is something else I could see as well. Um, or just kind of traveling abroad. I could see that. With Jupiter and Mercury being in the fourth house, but let's kind of focus in on Jupiter first. This brings in family, like the past, as well as just kind of like your more private life. And so we can see a lot of like emotional breakthroughs when it comes to family. And you could really be confronting your past and choosing to break free from old conditionings as well. With Saturn squaring Saturn and Neptune squaring Jupiter and Mercury in your fourth house, what we could see is some emotional decisions that need to be made, even if that means like a very serious conversation that brings up a lot of feelings. I think I could see that as well. Saturn is about limitation, Jupiter is about expansion. So either way, even if the conversation is hard to, either start, especially with Aries being involved. Nobody really wants to talk about it, especially with Neptune being there. I could see you not wanting to talk about it. Um, it's a conversation worth having because something definitely needs to be released and something needs to be defined with Saturn and Neptune being in your first. And so you can be weighing whether to stay or go bold in a new future. And so this is the difference between staying in your comfort zone or daring to do something new. When we're talking about Mercury, kind of going back to the fourth house, what we can look at is like those deep conversations and tough truths coming out when we're looking at the tone of the conversations. So, like we said, Saturn is in your first house, and that definitely brings a bit of a heaviness to conversations. Um, but with Saturn and Neptune, it's not just about defining something, it's also about kind of cutting out the delusion of the whole situation and being real with yourself. And also, sometimes if we're not real with ourselves, other people are brought in, people usually close to us, to either have a private conversation with us, or it's just really a time for us to, privately get real with ourselves and get very reflective. And so, family, are like yourself, or chosen family might challenge your plans, and it can help you get real about what comes next. For the tarot card for your horoscope for this full moon in Sagittarius, I have the Six of Wands. So the Six of Wands is about celebration. It's about recognition. With Saturn and Neptune being in your first, I definitely think you have a lot to sort out. But I think with Saturn and Neptune, it's kind of like building a castle, like a sandcastle with no water. And so it's learning how to create something solid out of this new beginning, out of you. And it's really defining who you are. But if we don't have that water to kind of keep things solid within that sand, everything just kind of keeps, you know, like like dissolving as we're trying to constantly build it up. And so I've always said this with the Six of Wands is about recognition from other people. But I think what's most important is with the Six of Wands is that we recognize who we are. We figure out who we are. And so therefore everybody else has a very clear understanding of who we are and what we're trying to achieve as well. Remember that people praise you in public for what you do in private. And I think that definitely applies here. That is your horoscope, Aries, and I wish you good luck. Hello, Taurus. Welcome to your full moon in Sagittarius horoscope. This full moon is occurring in your eighth house, where we see transformation, intimacy, as well as kind of like merged resources. And so we're definitely seeing a lot of transformation happening when we have a full moon in this house in Sagittarius, because Sagittarius is, of course, ruled by Jupiter. And so it's a lot of expansive expansive energy of like the mind is the first thing that comes to mind. The eighth house can also be like the occult, and Sagittarius can be about like study, philosophy, belief systems. And so I think not only are your belief systems getting a major overhaul, but we're also seeing you know a focus on kind of like almost like Sagittarius, Jupiter in particular can be a lot about like marriage. And so I think it's just a deepening or an expanding on the intimacy that you have with other people and really taking a look at that. But other than that, I think you're shedding outdated beliefs and leaning into deeper emotional connections. Venus is in your first, and I did want to talk a little bit about that because I do think it applies quite a bit. With Venus in your first, you're definitely very magnetic with people, and so people are a bit more generous with their time, their love, their money, even. And I think you yourself are definitely exuding that, and so you're bringing that in not just with your charisma, but definitely with like how you look and how you're presenting to people. And people want in on that. And so they're willing to, really, create more relationships with you because you yourself are emulating that already. And so with Jupiter and Mercury in Cancer being conjunct, that's all happening in your third house. And so we can see a lot of truth bombs coming up. And so some combos can definitely reveal like some manipulative belief systems. I think because when Jupiter is in Cancer, I guess like the upside of that is an announcement of sorts where it's about like, hey, I'm experiencing this, or this is something that is going to be coming up soon, and I'm really excited about it. But on the darker end, I could definitely see Jupiter and Mercury in Cancer being about something that's a bit hidden or manipulative. And so I'm wondering if because the third house is also where we get cults from. And so I'm wondering if some convos that you're having with people are having a lot to do with like almost like exposing manipulative beliefs or just like kind of like culty vibes that people are prescribing to, especially when we're talking about Sagittarius, which is about belief systems and spirituality, and really having to call people out on it, which can definitely, rub up against your very magnetic energy. And so I'm wondering if you're trying to decide on whether or not to rock the boat with certain people or not. That's, up to you on whether you decide to do that or not. But I did just want to point it out that both of those things are things I could see manifesting with this full moon, since belief systems are such a focus with the full moon in Sagittarius. Lastly, what we're seeing is Saturn and Neptune in the 12th house. And this is definitely, I think, clearing up some blind spots. And so it's a great focus and like kind of like a reinforcement of, it's just a time where you're rerouting your beliefs and definitely embracing a lot more emotional intelligence when it comes to your relationships with people. It's definitely a belief like detox. With Saturn in Aries as well as Neptune in Aries, that's where we're getting the emotional, like we're getting the clearing out in the detox part from. But Saturn in Aries can, in the 12th house, can be a lot about being a bit more reflective, and Neptune is giving like that emotional side of it. And so, Neptune is also where Neptune and the 12th house, excuse me, can be where we don't see things coming. Especially when it has to do with possibly our relationships with other people. Things that are done like in the dark are essentially coming to light or being brought up so that they can be talked about. And so we see that. And, I'm wondering if there are just some really hurtful truths that are coming up during those conversations, because we do have the Three of Swords for your tarot card. And so while I think the full moon like definitely like is appropriate. The Three of Swords is definitely appropriate for this transit for you, because the Three of Swords is about hard truths that you need to hear, but that are hard to hear. And so I think it's also something that's very liberating, especially since we have Saturn and Aries in the 12th. It's very much like, you can't move forward unless you face this truth and we clear this out and get this straight first. It's also about 12th house, Saturn in the 12th house can also be very much about delays, waiting, as well as boundaries that we have with other people and saying, this is where we can merge, but this is where I'm asking you not to cross this boundary at all. And so just be aware of that, Taurus, and good luck. That is your horoscope for the full moon in Sagittarius. Hello, Gemini. Welcome to your full moon in Sagittarius horoscope. This full moon is happening in your seventh house of partnerships. And I think we're definitely seeing a friendship audit coming up for you here. We have the full moon in your seventh, and so it's definitely um, basically it's saying that we're looking at our belief systems between ourselves and other people. But I think more than that, it's saying that with Sagittarius being a mutable sign and it really being sandwiched in between Capricorn, who is about achievement, and Scorpio, that's about going deep, it's essentially saying who's going to survive. Only the loyal and the real ones survive in like during this full moon flux that you have going on with your relationships. And so when we're looking at all of the different placements that are kind of playing into your seventh house full moon, I think that some relationships are definitely going to be strengthened and deepened, while other ones are going to fall by the wayside and they're just not going to make the cut. And so we have the ruler of this full moon, Jupiter, and Mercury being conjunct the full moon, or not conjunct the full moon, the Mercury being conjunct the ruler, Jupiter, in Cancer. That's all happening in your second house, where we see um, partners that they might really be building something beautiful with you, something that creates a lot of emotional security and just feelings of safety. The second house can be, what is ours. And Cancer isn't a lot of times thought about as a financial sign, but it can definitely be about resources. It definitely can be about finances and where do we feel safe at? Where do we feel secure? With the second house being about our values, our income, and kind of like, stability as well, we can definitely see it as like that's the lens that we're looking at our partnerships through, is what feels emotionally secure and what relationships are on solid, like on a solid and stable foundation. And looking at it, as far as just kind of being also spiritually aligned, kind of bringing it back between Cancer and its more intuitive nature, and kind of fusing that with Sagittarius in the seventh. We can also see that Saturn and Neptune and Aries are making a square to Jupiter and Mercury in Cancer in your second house. Saturn and Neptune in Aries are in your 11th. And so, like I said, it's a friendship audit. There are definitely going to be some shifts when it comes to community, our goals, especially like long term goals, even in like pay and recognition that we're getting from other people. I could see the 11th house can be like the pay that we're getting from our job. And therefore, it can also be about like, do we feel like we are not only aligned, but do we feel like the partnerships that we're in, that there's reciprocity on each side? Do we feel like, people are going to show up for us as much as we're showing up for them? And so you can definitely be reevaluating your support system and gravitating towards people who help you grow towards those new goals that you're setting, and just kind of like even the ones that you have now. And so it can definitely be a goal shift. And I think right now would also be a really great time to bounce ideas off of dreams, off of other people with dreams that you have. Because I think with the 11th house, even your dreams can clue you in, with Neptune being there in particular, can clue you into a lot of like possibly like plot holes that maybe you have missed. And so not just in your relationships, but with your needs in general for what you need. And so with new goal shifts and new plot holes and possibly potholes being revealed, it's time for new players to come in. And so it's only expected. And so I think the tarot card for you is very appropriate. We have the Wheel of Fortune, which is about something is changing, something shifting in our relationships. And whatever is shifting, it is karmic. And so if some relationships are being let go of, or, just kind of crumbling, let them. But while other ones are crumbling, you need to make sure that you're really paying attention to the ones where you guys are aligned and that you do have people that are really making you feel emotionally secure and safe, as well as you guys just really vibe on a more spiritual level as well. And you guys connect in those aspects too. But that is your horoscope, Gemini. Good luck. Hello, Cancer. Welcome to your full moon in Sagittarius horoscope. We have this full moon happening in your sixth house where we see health, routine. We also see coworkers in this house. And so when I think about this full moon for you, I think about almost like a bit of a glow up. But first and foremost, the other thing that I think about is like coworkers or your workspace. Even it doesn't have to be coworkers in particular, but it can be, I say the glow up because Jupiter is in your first house, but also the coworkers because of the full moon in the sixth house. And so it can be like coworkers are triggering a lot of changes for you, and that can be good or bad. You can definitely see coworkers either triggering you emotionally, uh, whether that be because they want you to mommy them, um, and they're just bringing out a lot of emotions, because Sagittarius is about leadership in some ways, and it can be about being loud, being bold, being seen, but it can also be about being seen. But the sixth house is kind of like the work that's very mundane. And so it can be about like coworkers not acknowledging the small things that you do behind the scenes, especially when it comes to like work and scheduling and like running certain documents or running certain errands or getting, those small things that are huge, getting those things done, and possibly even hopefully not plagiarizing your work, but possibly taking advantage or taking credit for the work that you have done. I could definitely see that. But I want to kind of get back to the glow up moment, since we do have um, the full moon in the sixth, because it's full moon in the sixth, it does have to do with health. And so you could definitely hit a major milestone. I can talk. I can speak English. Hit a major milestone when we're talking about health goals. And hopefully it's positive. With Jupiter being in your first house, I would expect it to be positive. With a full moon in the sixth, it would be something that you would be working on. You could get definitely some good news, especially with Mercury being in your first house. And so I think you're speaking up quite a bit, but you could be hitting a major milestone or adopting kind of like a new self-care regimen, or finding yourself in a situation that gives that kind of reckoning where you're like, okay, I need to take some time and just take care of myself. Because what I can also see is not only do we see coworkers possibly triggering us, and maybe even coworkers aren't triggering us, but they're kind of like confiding in you during this full moon. That's something else that I could see, is that you kind of become the workplace therapist. Um, there's a lot of emotional magnetism when we're talking about Jupiter and Mercury being in the first house. So not only are you very open to expressing yourself to other people, but other people are just very drawn to you as well. With Saturn in Aries being in the 10th house, it does have something to do with like status and title. And so we'll get to that in a second. But that's why I also say that there can be like some mommy energy, even if you aren't becoming a literal mother. People are almost like looking at you in that way. And that can get a bit sticky, because while you want to be there for people, and I know that you have that in there in you, Cancer, just being a very empathetic sign, you want to make sure you're not taking on other people's chaos, which is what I think can trigger the need for self-care and just kind of like cleansing that out, and detoxing. And so back to Saturn and Neptune being in your 10th, and it's all squaring Mercury and Jupiter in your first house. I think that's definitely like work dreams and goals versus the reality of your situation. So you might be redefining who you want to be, whether that's like wanting to get a promotion and not being seen for the work that you do, and there possibly being some disappointments there, or a boss overlooking you, or just like, and therefore like wanting to change what you're doing for work. I could definitely see that. Or like just like your goals as far as work are no longer aligning with what you're doing or how you're showing up in the world. Or like a new identity. Like I said, Jupiter, the planet of pregnancy, is in your first house. And so whether that's, taking on a new title at work, being somebody's fiance, because Jupiter is also about marriage, it's in your first house. It could be you saying, hey, I want to be married or I want to get engaged, and bringing that to a partner. I could see that, but there's some friction there on whether or not another person is receiving it or feels like they're there. That could also cause some friction. So I think Judgment, being your tarot card for the full moon in Sagittarius, is definitely spot on, because I think you're having to make those judgments on what can you take and what can you not take. What do you have time for? What do you have the emotional bandwidth for? I think all of that is kind of coming together when we're talking about Judgment. Something else that I could see with Judgment is a lot about reconciling, forgiving, or even kind of just creating closure from the past. And so with Jupiter in your sign, which heavily has to do with the past, it can be about like talking about the past and bringing those things back up so that you can bring closure to them. And so that is what I have for you for your horoscope for the full moon in Sagittarius. Good luck, Cancer. Hello, Leo. Welcome to your full moon in Sagittarius horoscope. This full moon is happening for you in your fifth house of romance, risks. We also see hobbies as well as children here. And so I'm going to tell you, like I told, I think like a few other other signs. When we have a full moon in Sagittarius that's ruled by Jupiter in Cancer, especially in your 12th house, we can see unexpected pregnancies. And so if that's not the goal, make sure you're wrapping it up. If so, congratulations. This is your time to shine. Other than that, though, other than all of the pregnancy, the predictions I have been possibly like unwarranted pregnancy energy I've been putting out there for people throughout this whole video. What we can see with this full moon being in your fifth is that you're definitely feeling more creative, you're feeling bold, a lot of leadership energy is here because you're just really working from a very authentic place and very passionate place. And so people are really, really noticing you, and that can definitely bring in a lot of romantic opportunities as well. I think that your inner flirt is definitely showing itself at this time. And so, especially with Venus being in your 10th at the moment in Taurus. And so, um, Jupiter, the ruler of this full moon, is in Cancer with Mercury in Cancer in your 12th house. And so this can be some unexpected announcement of pregnancy or some sort of unexpected information coming out when we're talking about creative pursuits, or just being very inspired creatively. It can also be, being very interested in learning about occult studies or getting very mystical. I'm thinking like with the 12th house, I'm thinking like shamanism or something like that. Um, Doing like meditations with fire, or and like using like opposing energies. Like with Cancer, it could be water obviously, but like with fire being Sagittarius, and those two kind of coming together, it's like that steam and that passion that's needed to really kind of propel you forward into some sort of new path or direction. And you're clearing things out in order to be able to create that new beginning. And so we can see that Saturn is in Aries, which is going to be in your ninth house, with Neptune in Aries as well in your ninth house. And so that's where a lot of the clearing out of certain belief systems that just don't fit anymore, especially when it comes to um, self-expression and not doubting yourself and wanting to really, put yourself out there and taking the risk to put yourself out there, where that can pay off. And just kind of knocking down those limitations for yourself. We can see some travel delays, or just kind of missed flights, missed documents when we see Saturn and Neptune in Aries in the ninth. What we can also see is like legal situations. You want to make sure that you're checking the fine print. With the ninth house, we see a lot of like legal and marriage matters as well come up. So just that those areas might need extra caution when we're talking about like missing information or hidden information, especially like I'm thinking like hidden clauses or hidden, especially since it's all squaring Mercury and Jupiter. It could be like hidden documents, forgotten documents, missing documents, or just omitted information. That's coming up, especially when it comes to romantic partners, or just like kind of like, yeah, missed scheduling events, is something else I could see that's coming up with that aspect. And so make sure you're just being very aware with being very aware and keeping track of your documents and reading the fine print and being aware of missing information. So, but either way, I think it's a very creative time for you. The 12th house is where we can get very connected with the divine. And so, but we can also see a lot of delays here as well. And so it's working for the future, not for the right now. And so it can be a lot of delayed gratification with the fifth house being involved. And so we see the Ace of Wands being the tarot card for you. I think it's pretty self explanatory. You're really excited and starting something new. um, this can be something that feels like a bit of a reset or like a rebirth for you. And, I think it's more of a rebirth of self, like we said about self expression. And you're really bursting forward with a lot of energy in something. Just make sure that you have a plan in place so that that energy doesn't burn out quickly and that it can go for the long haul. And that is your horoscope, Leo. Good luck. Hello, Virgo. Welcome to your full moon in Sagittarius horoscope. We have this full moon happening in your fourth house of home, privacy, family, the past, all that good stuff. I think the mantra that I want to give to you, Virgo, for this full moon is going to be energy protection, or really defining who deserves your energy. Because when we see a full moon in Sagittarius in the fourth house, and Sagittarius is such an expansive, expressive sign, and when it's in a such a soft and emotional, drama filled place such as the fourth house, we can see a lot of family drama happening. And so emotions can definitely run high. But I definitely think that's also where a lot of breakthroughs and understanding can emerge, because communication is really being wrapped in with you, Mercury, being so close to Jupiter, the ruler of this full moon in Cancer. And so there's a lot of opportunity for emotional conversations to turn into major understanding and breakthroughs and deep emotional ties, like coming from that emotional closeness and feelings of safety, coming from that. From that vulnerability, but I think it's all going to depend on whether or not each person is willing to be vulnerable and set down the drama. Um, so with that being said, we could also see long distance relatives kind of coming in. Maybe long distance relatives don't know what's going on and they have an issue with something and it pops off in a whole bunch of family drama. I don't know. We're creating stories right now, which so we're gonna like backtrack into the general kind of like structure. But it's definitely something I could see is like long distance relatives, or relatives at a distance coming to visit, or you going to visit them. And we could see them or you pop in and out, or do some traveling. Or you could just hear news from home that takes you into a more nostalgic state, or just makes you a bit more reflective about the things that you learn, and understanding how things used to be versus how they are right now, and get you thinking about that as well. And that can bring up its own emotions. Like I said, Jupiter and Mercury are both in Cancer in your 11th house. And so this is where I think friends can be a great support system for you, and definitely can help you bring private goals into the light, and really encourage you to achieve those things and go after those things, because there's a lot of emotional encouragement, because they see the vision and like all the passion that you have for whatever you're trying to achieve. It could also just expand on on like your own intuition and forming intuitive bonds with different people, new people as well. It could also be like friends from the past come back up. That's something else I could see, and you're hearing from those people. Saturn and Neptune are both in Aries in your eighth house. And so we definitely see a lot of themes of privacy between the full moon and the fourth, and then Saturn and Neptune being square Jupiter and Mercury in the 11th. And so I think this is more you just like being very discerning and protecting your energy and only sharing those dreams with the trusted few that you have in your circle. You're not just telling everybody about you, what you are trying to build or what you're trying to achieve. You're keeping it away from somebody. And I think it's more of an energetic choice rather than trying to be sneaky. You just don't want to tell certain people about it yet because you want to protect that thing, whatever you're creating or that relationship. While it's still in its building phase, while it's still in its young phase, it's kind of like your own like proverbial baby. And so for and you're just really deciding on whether or not like how to move forward. I think that's valid. If you don't know what like the future of something looks like, Virgo, I think you're very much that sign that's like, if I don't know what it looks like in the future, I'm not about to tell somebody else what about it, because they're going to have questions I don't know how to answer. So I think you like to know all that stuff. Also, Saturn being in the eighth, I think that this can also bring up like just a lot of anxiety, and you opening up to people on that level, and just feeling very guarded can also be a part of this full moon as well. For the tarot card that we have for you, we have the Two of Wands, which can be a lot about decision making on whether or not we want to move forward with something. And so, whether that is a new relationship or a new friendship or a new project or dream that we have, I think, or inspiration even, in creating that thing and making it real. The Two of Wands says, I've already built something stable, but it's time to go on to the next thing. But the big deciding factor is on whether or not you decide to actually move forward, or do you stay in your comfort zone? Do you dare to dream? That is your full moon in Sagittarius horoscope, Virgo. Good luck. Hello, Libra. Welcome to your horoscope for the full moon in Sagittarius. We have this full moon happening in your third house, where we see siblings, road trips, neighborhoods, friends, even sometimes. But we can even see like learning when it comes to just kind of life experience in particular. And so when we have a full moon in the third house, it can also be about communication. And so I definitely think we'll see a lot of very animated communication, very loud communication for you when we're talking about this full moon. Sagittarius is big, it's boisterous. And so when it's in the house that has so much to do with how we're relating to other people, there are a bit of dramatics going on for sure. And I think with Sagittarius being a fire sign, we can definitely see not only animated conversations, but a lot of clarity coming through. Sagittarius as a fire sign is going to cut through the bullshit. And so there can definitely be with that conversation surrounding possibly book smarts versus life experience, or even since the 10th house is brought into this, it could be an older person coming in and saying, hey, I realize that this is what you've learned, but this is what I've experienced, and trying to give you that information. Now, what happens after that, I do have lots of questions about because I do think there will be a little friction, since Saturn in Aries, which is your seventh house, is playing in to this as well. And so there can be some friction when it comes to your relationships with a boss, a parent, and all that kind of, just kind of congregating together. And so something else that we can see, I think I've already kind of like really harped in on this. I don't know if I'm going to say it for every single horoscope, but we can definitely see with the third house, we can see siblings. But because Jupiter is in Cancer, what we can see, the ruler of this full moon, what we can see is maybe siblings talking about expanding the family, whether that's through a baby, whether that is through an engagement that's happening. I could see really either one. Or it could just be about, you wanting to go on a road trip, somebody surprising you, or a sibling saying, hey, let's go on a short road trip together. get some bonding time in, and just really wanting to have that time with you is something that I could see. Um, with Jupiter and Mercury being in the 10th, definitely career talk can get emotional. And you just kind of rethinking some of your goals when it comes to your career and possibly discussing big changes that might affect, or that those changes of goals how that might affect your career, and how that might affect, relationships with parents or a boss. I could see with parents also, like, really that, coming in, because I do wonder if for some reason, with the third house being involved, if for some reason, if you make a change in career, if you're having to talk to parents because you're needing to either come back home for a little bit, or while you make a shift, or if there's some sort of like partnership happening with finances, or yeah, just like that conversation coming in, and just trying to bounce ideas off of a parent or a boss. There can even just be, um, I bring that up because the third house can also be about moving as well. And so when it comes to bosses, it could just come down to like transitions as well as responsibility, with the 10th house playing into this as well. Saturn is in the seventh with Neptune in Aries. And so it's definitely a partnership reality check that we're seeing here. So be really clear about your boundaries, and I think it could also, be a time where you're really getting very clear on who is there to support you and who is not. And that can be its own kind of like a not hurtful thing, but it can definitely be a shocking like revelation when it comes to finding out who your support system is, because obviously we don't always expect to, realize that people that we think are in our corner aren't as in our corner as we thought they were. And so just be aware of that, especially in professional or goal oriented alliances or friendships, that not everybody is going to be there with you throughout the whole journey. And so we do have the tarot card, the Nine of Swords, which is about anxiety. It's about losing sleep. And so I could see, there just being a lot of mental energy that's going on with this full moon in the third. Sagittarius is a fire sign, which we usually attribute to action, but the third house has a lot to do with the mind. And so it can be like a lot of insomnia. And the third house, obviously, is going to square up against the 12th house, which the 12th house is going to be Scorpio for you. Mars at this time is in your, I can do math. Hold on a second. Mars is in Leo, which means it's in your 11th. And so, yeah, there's definitely some shifting when it comes to alliances that's happening. And, that can definitely have you feeling like there's a little anxiety there or uncertainty, which can be causing anxiety. And so I think as long as you are staying strong in your expectations and your boundaries with people and just staying focused on what it is that you're trying to create, you'll be just fine. But definitely take care of yourself. And, meditation and affirmations might do really well for you during this time. But that is your horoscope, Libra. Good luck. Hello, Scorpio. Welcome to your full moon in Sagittarius horoscope. This full moon is happening in your second house, where we find your resources, your values, as well as self esteem, and income as well. And so, when we have a full moon here, I think you're definitely feeling yourself a little bit. I love that for you. Sagittarius is definitely very big. It's ruled by the great benefic that's in its exaltation in Cancer right now. And so I definitely think you're feeling yourself a little bit. And I love that for you. What I want to say, however, is because this full moon is in the second house, I think that it's really important to make sure that while you are feeling like you are on top of the world, I want to make sure that you realize that your bank account and your budget still needs to be followed. When we're talking about the second house, a second house full moon in such an expansive sign of Sagittarius, like Sagittarius, we really want to make sure that you're making sure you're not stretching your wallet too thin, or just kind of like your resources, such as your energy. So it doesn't have to be tangible resources. You can't do everything on your own, especially when we're talking about the second house being about assistance, and where we can sometimes be a bit slow to get things going. And so procrastination can come in, and like distraction and procrastination can come in a lot when we have a full moon in the 12th house, because possibly we just have a lot of things going on emotionally is something else I can see. And so I think task delegation is going to be key for you during this full moon. So don't try and do it all on your own. Definitely utilize your network and help, and ask for help when you need it. I think it could really help your vision, or whatever you're trying to create, to thrive. We have Jupiter and Mercury in Cancer in your ninth house. And so this can definitely create a little bit of stress, from overbooking or last minute curveballs that we can see. And it can just cause some like scheduling conflicts as well. But it's also, the ninth house is also where we find like truth, as well as like learning as well. But when it's in relation to Saturn and Aries in the sixth, as well as Neptune in the sixth, I think it's more about scheduling, routines, as well as like health. The sixth house is going to be more about like physical health. And so it can be, I think this full moon is a lot about you like reimagining your work life balance, and asking if your dream that you're trying to create is sustainable for the long term, for the long haul, or if there's something else you need to learn before you actually make that dream into reality. Because the ninth house can also be about like manifesting certain things. And so I think you're just trying to create some sort of like foundation or like structure for that dream that you're trying to create, and asking yourself, do you have the energy, income, the time for all those things, especially since Saturn is in the sixth house. Saturn is the god of time. And when we're talking about the sixth house, it says, do I have time to get this done? Am I a little strapped on time, on money? Do I need to venture out and look at other resources or delegate certain things? Do I need to outsource to be able to achieve what I'm trying to achieve? Do people at a distance really value what I'm trying to create? And that's something I could really see as well. And so for your tarot card that we have for your horoscope, we have the Three of Wands, which is all about starting something new. It is the Sun and Aries card. And so it can be about a lot about travel, which I could definitely see with Jupiter in Cancer, plus like Mercury in Cancer being in the ninth house. It could be about like, stating to people, hey, I need help, especially with people that, you're very close to. Um, I think it could also be like with Cancer in the ninth, it can be like family, like reaching out to family at a distance, or possibly even going to visit family at a distance. I don't think it's necessarily about family, but I won't like rule that out. I think it could be more about like chosen family. um, I think also with the ninth house and sixth house being involved, it's really a call to take a little bit more time to invest in self care as well, um, in just kind of like, yeah, clearing out those like that mental noise that is having an effect on the body. And so it can be, just kind of you going off and spending some time to be alone, to kind of like sort things out mentally, and so that you're able to take a lot of stress off your body. But that is your horoscope for the full moon in Sagittarius, Scorpio. Good luck. Hello, Sagittarius. Welcome to your full moon in Sagittarius, horoscope. This full moon is happening in your first house of self. And so we're seeing this full moon obviously be all about you, or very you focused. And so the first thing I want to say, Sagittarius, as I feel like I am becoming a broken record throughout this whole video, because pregnancy pregnancy is real for the Jupiter signs, but also for like Cancer placements. So that's Pisces, Sagittarius, Cancer, I guess, and even Leo a little bit. But we're just going to say Cancer and the Jupiter placements are the ones that are at the highest probability. I won't say risk, but at the highest probability for just very fertile energy at this time. And so, with this full moon being in your first house, the full moon can literally be like your womb expanding, whether that's from like emotional eating or from a baby. It is up to you. So if you want to conceive, I think this is a great full moon to do so. If not, make sure that you're planning accordingly. But either way, I think it's definitely you're a time where you're expressing yourself in new ways and kind of like realigning with what brings you joy. We see the ruler of this full moon in Sagittarius, Jupiter in Cancer, conjunct Mercury in Cancer, all coming together in your eighth house, where we see deep intimacy and transformation. And so, this can be about navigating joint investments or like what you're creating with other people. So, if that's a baby, cool. If it's just about kind of like creating deeper vulnerability and intimacy with a partner, I could also see that and just kind of deepening your relationship. But either way, it's about some sort of investment, whether it be emotional or financial. It's about security and stability still, and having conversations about that, possibly even having to sign documents about that, because Sagittarius can also be about documents. But it's getting a better understanding of where each person is and possibly uncovering what is being repressed, because the eighth house is where we kind of like hide things that we're repressing. And so I could see that as well. Saturn and Neptune in Aries are going to be in your fifth house. With Saturn and Neptune in the fifth, it can feel like you work hard, play hard. Saturn in the fifth can definitely feel a bit more heavy. And so it's a nice little like tap into um you where where you're going to be like working on like an area where you're going to be working and under construction for the next 2.5 years. Saturn will go back into Pisces for a little bit later this year and then head back into Aries permanently March of 2026. And so you're getting a nice little sneak peek, Sagittarius, into what is to come. So Saturn and Neptune in Aries in your fifth is kind of like passion with a plan, and it's creativity with a plan. And so it's also quite literally putting childish things behind you. And so literally it could be like, if you're not creating a baby, it could be you're creating a business that you're just very passionate about, but you're like, okay, I'm trying to get real about actually creating this thing. And so that means I have to sign certain paperwork. I need to get certain things in. I need to get certain materials and things like that. And so either way, I want you to be bold but smart when it comes to these kinds of things. And so definitely channel your fire into something that's a bit more long lasting. Saturn is about things over time. While Neptune can be about being dreamy and mystical. And I love that in the fifth house, but it's like, okay, we need to make sure that we're staying focused and actually making something out of that creativity. But also it can be like, you can love something just to love it. You don't always have to make money off of it. And so that is going to be a Sagittarius to Sagittarius like placement decision. But just so you know, that's something that I could definitely see for this full moon for you, since it is so personal. We have for your tarot card for this full moon, we have the Eight of Cups. I feel like this is appropriate just because we have Saturn in the fifth being such a big part of this full moon. And the Eight of Cups is about leaving something behind to go into the unknown, even if what we're leaving behind feels very stable and comfortable. The eighth house is like kind of where things like all kind of culminate that stress us out. Like the eighth house is where we have all those things that we don't necessarily want to talk about. But the fifth house is where we want to have fun. And so I think when we're getting into that, we're diving into parts of the psyche, and you're really getting real with ourselves and, figuring out what do we kind of have to leave behind in order to get more serious and be taken more serious by other people so that we can create with other people in a more long-standing like situation. And so that's kind of how I see the Eight of Cups, is that there might be some, feelings of sadness or heaviness just because you're having to shed some things. But honestly, Sagittarius, I think this is something that that's not new to you. I think you're very used to the ups and downs. And so I think you'll handle it with grace, and you're off to to a new adventure. And so if you have to cut out anything in your life, whether it be drinking, because I could definitely see that in the fifth house with Neptune and Saturn being there, is like giving up drinking. It could definitely be a detox of the body for sure, even though we don't have the sixth house kind of like put in with this, even though we do have Mercury in here. But, just kind of like saying this isn't healthy. And so I'm, Xing this person, this substance, this whatever out of my life, so that I can go on to something new, even if that feels scary or uncomfortable. But that is your horoscope, Sagittarius. Good luck. Hello, Capricorn. Welcome to your full moon in Sagittarius horoscope. This full moon is happening in your 12th house, where we see isolation, we see reflection, mental health, dreams, as well as solitude and self sabotage, and just all things that have to do with the subconscious. And so, when a full moon in Sagittarius is here, things can definitely get a bit more mystical and reflective. And, we can feel like we want to really retreat into our minds. And so, what I think what we'll see kind of right away is we can see more focus on our motivations, our subconscious motivations, healing, and just kind of diving into that inner world of ours and understanding why we're doing what we're doing, and figuring out if that just really truly aligns with who we are at this stage of our life at this point, and figuring out kind of where to go from there, what needs to stay, what needs to go. Um, the ruler of Jupiter, not of Jupiter, the ruler of this full moon in Sagittarius is going to be Jupiter in Cancer, which is going to be in your seventh house, and it's conjunct Mercury in Cancer, also in the seventh house. And so I think what we can also see is while you're in this retreating and rest in retreat and solitude mode, you can end up getting some texts or like just kind of like some messages, unexpected messages from either a secret admirer or from just partners in general, whether they be platonic, business oriented, or romantic. It doesn't have to be strictly romantic, but it can definitely be some sort of unexpected message for sure when we have the 12th house and the 7th house brought in with that, like those Mercury themes. um, and it could really bring up some big emotions. The 12th house is already kind of like where we find subconscious and emotions, and Cancer being brought in as an undertone of this full moon in Sagittarius is definitely also stirring up emotions. And so, especially with Mercury being in Cancer, it's emotional conversations. And so it can even be just like not even getting a message. It can be like just emotional conversations coming up out of nowhere, whether they trigger you or not, that is up to you. That can definitely be part of the healing that you're doing at this time. But I think also, when we're talking about Saturn being in you, literally Capricorn, your ruler is Saturn. It's in the fourth house in Aries. A lot of Capricorn placements, especially Capricorn risings, are finding it hard to get out of their homes at this time and be seen out in the world. If you see a wild Capricorn out in the wild, don't frighten them. But I think we could definitely see Capricorns just doing a lot of retreat, especially with Neptune in the fourth as well, because Neptune is about what is not seen, what's a bit more private. And with the fourth house being already a very private house, very emotional, we can see, certain things from the past or people from the past and us, or yourself, Capricorn rising speaking here, like coming together in a very private space, or in a way that not everybody is privy to, and really having to face those emotions that are coming up, like being dredged up by the past. Um, Something else I could see is that with all those like relationships kind of being focused in on, with Jupiter in the seventh and Mercury also being in the seventh, and people just wanting to talk to you, that is a lot of energy coming your way, Capricorn. And when you're in a time where you're just trying to figure out where you're at mentally, that can get very emotionally exhausting. And so, something I would definitely say would be good for this full moon is energy management. Um, like, I think you'll have a lot of invitations for people saying, hey, come out with me here, go with me here, whatever. That's great. But when you have a full moon in Sagittarius in your 12th, it can also bring up a lot of drama. And so just being very aware and discerning about what relationships are more prone to exhausting, you know, drama and events, I think would be really important to just kind of be able to manage your energy correctly and being able to decide whether or not you say yes or no to certain invitations. Or conversations even. And so I think you're really evaluating that. You're doing a lot of observing during this full moon, and fleshing out the things that in relationships that just are not the most healthy, for your mental, for your spiritual, all of those things. And so I think that's definitely something that's coming up. Are you ghosting people? Probably. Are you wrong? Probably not. Just remember, though, it needs to come with balance. And so, when we're talking about people reaching out to us, if you are ghosting people, you cannot blame anybody. If you are feeling lonely, you cannot blame people and say that nobody showed up for you, because you also have the responsibility of reaching back out to people. And so, I'm not going to tell you whether or not you should ghost somebody. Look, that it's your prerogative. However, just make sure you're not ghosting yourself and abandoning yourself in those situations, and making sure that you are also being very conscious of your own energy at the time, and do your thing like you always do. For the tarot card that we get for you, we get the Lovers, which is about fated relationships, but also this is about your choices. So I think it's a bit self-explanatory when we're talking about this full moon and the tarot card that we have. Um, the Lovers card can be about, some relationship that makes a major impact in your life, and, meeting that person. And so I definitely think, the love of your life, could they show up out of nowhere? Yes, but you're responsible for going out and meeting them. That does mean that you have to leave your house. But also, it's about the choices that we want. You can have the best of whatever, Capricorn. But whether that's going to be you have the nicest house ever or you have the most epic love story ever, it's completely up to you. It's about what you value. And so that is your horoscope, Capricorn. Good luck. Hello, Aquarius. Welcome to your full moon in Sagittarius horoscope. This full moon is happening in your 11th house, where we see community, friendships, but we also see our goals and allies as well. And so, something that comes to mind right away is going to be like you're building your dream team, or you're finding your dream team. You're finding the people that just get you and that get it. And so you're really looking for people that dream just as big as you do and have like those same aligned goals and energy. Sagittarius is so much about the energy of expansion. And so it's about like expanding your network and your allies, and just kind of by expanding community, but also like the size of those goals and size of that dream are expanded on, and finding that in like common with other people is very important during this time for you. And so I think something else we could see is maybe like with Sagittarius being in the mix with the 11th house, this can definitely have to do with like legal matters and social justice and things like that. And so it gives me very much the vibes of I want to be surrounded with people that are standing up for a cause that's bigger than just one person. Excuse me. And something else I could see is maybe like group travel, spiritual retreats. That's also something I could see with this full moon coming up. Um, with Jupiter in Cancer, conjunct Mercury in Cancer, that's all happening in your sixth house of health, routine, and just kind of like scheduling. Definitely watch for burnout, especially like emotional burnout. You might be overgiving, especially like at work, or just like overscheduling yourself and stretching yourself too thin to support other people. Um, and so you just want to be mindful of how much you're promising to other people. Saturn and Neptune are going to be in your third house where we see communication, we see short distance travel, but we also see like learning as well in like our neighborhood. And so time management, I think, with Saturn being there, because with Saturn and Neptune being in the third, time can be a big part of it, but Neptune is kind of like where we don't have boundaries. And so giving too much of our time to other people, and then we no longer have time for ourselves, and we're kind of losing ourselves in the mix of other people and just becoming too much of a neighborhood rather than defining the we or the you in the situation, because you've got a lot of community going on. But what I'm looking for is where's the you in all of this. And so I think that time management is going to be your BFF for this full moon in Sagittarius. And so make sure you're balancing the hustle and the homies. And, in making sure that your personal goals are being achieved, but you're not losing yourself in all of that movement. Because the third house can just be about movement in general. And so, whether that means that you're taking time to just kind of take a walk in nature to ground yourself, or just, take a little mental quiet time, I think that could also be very beneficial as well. For your tarot card for this full moon, we have the Six of Cups, which is about nostalgia. Not surprising with Jupiter and Cancer. Cancer is definitely a bit nostalgic for sure. It's about comforts. And so I think with the Six of Cups, you could be seeing a lot of people coming back up from the past, that are triggering that more nostalgic, sentimental side of you. And you're really trying to be there for those people. But also, I think this is more also speaking like more to the busyness of everything. Because the Six of Cups, in my mind, it says that I wish things were less complex or a little less like noisy, and I want to feel a bit more carefree. And maybe the new community that you're finding is that carefreeness. But like I said, where is the you in all of this? Because you still have to come back to the present. You have to come back to the now. And so while the past might feel carefree, you have to find a way to bring the carefree into the present and not just in the past. You have to find that within yourself, not in just other people. And so don't forget that you are not just the group, you are not just the cause, you are not just the culture. You are also your own person. And so that is your horoscope for the full moon in Sagittarius. Good luck, Aquarius. Hello, Pisces. Welcome to your full moon in Sagittarius horoscope. We have this full moon happening in your 10th house, where we see career, status, recognition, authority figures, all that good stuff. And so when I look at the full moon in Sagittarius in your 10th, the first thing that comes to mind is that there's some sort of shift happening when we're talking about either like your status, and how you're literally being labeled out in the public, or like in your career. Whether that is like you are getting a promotion or you are deciding to be an entrepreneur. This is why I say that. Like we could see like a lot of like title changes. But I say entrepreneur because we have Jupiter in the fifth, with Mercury in the fifth as well in Cancer. And so it's giving that you are expressing yourself in a very different way when it comes to your public persona or your public life. Could this just be that you're going through your own kind of like little like literal physical glow up? Absolutely. Could you be giving yourself a makeover? Absolutely. That's how you show up in the world, like your appearance. I could see that. But also, what I could see is you wanting to take more charge of your schedule, of your work, of your career. And so, therefore, entrepreneur. That's how I kind of interpret that. You could even be wanting to go after a little bit of public recognition. But either way, this transit is very much about you and how you show up to other people. And so I think you're really in like your creative boss era with this full moon between the ruler and Mercury being in your fifth house. And this can also be very romantic. Mercury is the ruler of your seventh. It's the ruler of your seventh and your fourth. And so it can definitely be about deep emotional bonds that you have with others. And just, deepening those kinds of relationships in a more romantic sense, since the fifth house is involved, or a more creative way. So it can be like other than romance, it could, also have to do with like rebranding, some sort of new look, a rebrand of your look is also an option. Um, but it could also, just like I think I've been saying for so many other um, signs, you're a Jupiter ruled sign, and with Jupiter being in its exaltation in Cancer, the baby maker. The baby maker is home. Mother is in her favorite sign. We can see pregnancy. And so, if pregnancy is not something you want, make sure that you are taking precautions. Wrap it up. And so, because I think when we're looking at Saturn and Neptune in Aries being in your second house, a lot of questions are coming up of, can I afford this glow up that I'm having out in the world? Can I afford this status change, this title change that I'm having out in the world? Am I going from single to a mommy? Am I going from single to a dad? Whatever, a parent. Because the 10th house is also about our parents as well. It's about authority figures, if we're not talking like strictly like career based things. And so it can also be, a question of, is my self esteem or my self worth aligned with the dream that I want to bring into fruition? Um, but what I could also see is that there can be a bit of burnout when we're talking about like trying to create your own business. That is a lot of work. And what I could see with the second house, Saturn and Neptune in the second house, doing is saying, okay, not only I'm getting real about what I can and cannot afford when it comes to like making myself over, or like investing in certain things, investing my resources into certain things physically, but it's also, wow, this is a lot of work, because the second house is also called the place of Hades. It's where we get a bit sluggish on things. And with Saturn and Neptune there, things can get very heavy, get very emotional, and we're just emotionally burnt out. And owning your own business, I think, to a lot of people I think one of the biggest shocks is how much work it is that you're working almost more than you would be in a 9 to 5. And so I think that's something that definitely applies when we're talking about this. And I think you're asking yourself, do I have enough energy to accommodate this new change that's happening that I want to be recognized for? Either way. And so I think you're seeing a lot of, you want the freedom, the nameplate on the desk, but do you know what you're building? And does it fulfill you? I think that's like kind of like the biggest question here. For your tarot card for this full moon in Sagittarius, we've got the Seven of Cups. Um, the Seven of Cups is a lot about uncertainty. It's about confusion and needing to get very straight on what it is that you want, and getting very clear on that, because you have a lot of options, which I'd say very much is the vibes of, of a full moon in Sagittarius, since it's so expansive. You have a lot of options in front of you, but you need to take the time to write down the pros and cons, either mentally or on paper. What choice or what option aligns with you the closest, and your goals that you have in the more long term, since Saturn is playing a part in this. It's about long term stuff. So it's not about the instant gratification, it's about the right now. And I don't want you guys to get caught up on what looks nice right now, because that's definitely a trap that can be seen with the 10th house and 5th house being involved. It's like, I want the public recognition right now. But Saturn and Neptune in the second is saying, I'll get that, but I need to be tactful about it. I need to put all of my resources into that. And that might take some time. And so planning things out, and really making sure that whatever option that you pick is most aligned with who you are and and basically stacking your deck so that every decision that you make is getting you closer to that goal that you ultimately want. That is how you decide what path to take. And that in itself takes a bit of time, is deciding that, but it is going to give you the most clarity. And so with that being said, Pisces, that is your full moon in Sagittarius horoscope. Good luck. Well, all right. I hope that you guys have enjoyed this full moon in Sagittarius breakdown as well as the horoscopes. Let me know where this full moon is in your chart and where it's landing. I'd love to hear from you as well as your experience with it after the fact as well. If you would like to get any consultations with me, you can head on over to EdenIAstro.com. The website is back up. I just needed to make a couple tweaks on it. Other than that, I wanted to take a minute to say hello to all our new subscribers. I feel like we're going to need to like come up with like a name for us, like as like a family. I'm like, I want us to have like a cute little name. So like, if you have any ideas, please let me know. But other than that, I will talk to you guys soon. I really appreciate all of you, the ones that have been here from day one to the new subscribers in our growing family of astro lovers. I am very excited to have you guys here. Welcome. Other than that, guys, I will see you in the next one.